Alright, let's get started. Turn the music off, and we are now live. I am in the studio today with Miss Floie Trimmer from our Steubenville office. Wave hi. And my name is Johnny Kazemka. This is the Ohio Valley Real Estate Reports with Harvey, Goodman, Realtor. And today we are discussing Real Estate University, First Time Homebuyer 101.
Yep.
And, Floie, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Floie Trimmer. Like he said, I'm from the Steubenville office. I do travel around, though, so if you need help, call this girl.
Yep. So how this works is we are broadcasting live right now to YouTube, to Facebook, to Twitch, to LinkedIn, all these different sources. And this is a public service that we do for our buyer, seller clients, and just even for the public in general. Mm-hmm. It's an open question form. You can ask any question anytime in the comments below. Your comments should theoretically, in real time, show on the TV back here, and we'll do the best to answer them. But Floie, you've printed out some bullet points for us, and do you want to get started?
I do. I have a little bit of information. First, I'm going to start with some statistics. Mm-hmm. First-time home buyers, according to the NAR, so the national reporting, says they make up about 33% of the market for buyers. We had discussed previously, we personally think first-time home buyers around here is about half of the market.
I would say at least half, if not more.
Yeah, it seems there's way more first-time home buyers out there right now than repeat buyers. The median age for first-time buyers is about 32 years old nationally.
Sure.
And around here that might be fair too, I think. Yeah. A lot of first-time buyers, they don't want to buy right after high school. They want to get their career going. They want to save up a little money for that big down payment they might have. So they tend to rent first.
Yeah, I think that's become one of the biggest problems in our area is that somewhat the median income has stayed level for the last many years, but the rent has gone up.
Yeah.
So people that are in that category, like you said, if they wait to take that next walk of life, if they're 30 years old and looking to be a first-time buyer, if they've rented that entire time, the way that I've always described rent is no matter if you're paying rent or you have your own house, you're essentially just paying someone else's mortgage.
Exactly.
So
your landlord's already paid their mortgage off a long time ago. Why are you still paying it for them?
Yeah, and if you're paying rent, I mean, there is some value to renting. I mean, if you are, a college student, for example, and you're not buying in that, if you go to Morgantown, you go to WVU,
right?
It doesn't mean you have to buy a house there. So there's times where it is appropriate, but in today's market, with interest rates for first-time buyers being as low as they are, there is a massive incentive to at least consider purchasing as an option. And a lot of the barriers to entry for that too is not just, I'm nervous as a buyer. I'm in my 20s. I just like the liquidity of being able to move from point A to point B. It's a huge potential for your financial future.
Right.
So for example, someone could go and take a $75,000 loan out right now for a first-time buyer, a USDA line of credit. And we'll get to all that here later in the podcast. But with 0% down, it's $550, $600 a month. I mean, that's less than what you'd be paying for rent on the same house, but you're also gaining equity with that. I mean,
exactly.
So, and I think that's what we're trying to talk about here today. Is,
right.
So, anyways, proceed.
87% of all buyers, so first-time and repeat buyers, use a realtor, and that number is growing every day. And it's you've seen, I'm sure, the Pinterest fails where, you can either hire a professional to make these fancy cupcakes for you and they turn out amazing versus when I try to do it myself and everything's lopsided and it's like sliding off the side. It looks like a monster and not a unicorn anymore.
Yeah.
So, which is really a shame there, but.
Hey, Brad, thanks for the follow of the page. But at any rate, yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the bullet points that I think people miss the mark too is that a lot of buyers, they typically fall, I guess, in their line of thinking, I'm going to call this particular person because I've seen their number and I'm going to stick with that person.
Exactly.
And I'm not always the best agent to work with under different circumstances, and we all have our own kind of expertise, so to speak.
But personality makes up a big part of that too.
Well, it does, but the public also doesn't understand that one agent can show any house at any given time, doesn't matter who it's listed with.
Exactly.
So developing a relationship with that particular agent is, in my mind, important. But the other thing too is that buyers, they don't pay us. They don't pay our commission. They don't pay anything at all.
Exactly.
So when you say like 87% of buyers use I can show you any house at any given time It doesn't matter. It doesn't cost you anything at all, and I'll walk you through every single step of the entire process, from getting pre-qualified to how to write the offer, contracting the offer, pulling all the moving levers inside of that real estate transaction to make sure that it goes smoothly, and it doesn't cost anything. Right?
Yeah,
So,
it's a free service that a lot of people just ignore or overlook because they think it's too much of a hassle. They think they can do a better job on their own. It's cheaper if they do it themselves, which it's not cheaper. It's free.
Well,
so
I think especially for first-time buyers, this is a massive. Typically, real estate is the largest single transaction anybody makes in their life.
oh yeah,
So when you're a first-time buyer and looking at something, we'll just call it $75,000. What else are you going to spend $75,000 on?
Yep.
So just to work up the courage, the nerve to, get that started, it's a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah.
But the idea here is that, and that's why we're talking today, all it takes is a phone call. You can call me, you can call you, any agent, and we will gladly answer any question that you have. And like I said, the first-time buyer loans that exist today are basically a government-backed loan, USDA, FHA, VA if you're a veteran. The government rate right now is so historically low that there is a massive incentive to at least make that initiative, to take that, even if you're anxious, you have a little bit of jitters about taking that step. It helps to be prepared, and it takes 10 minutes on a phone call.
At the very least, ask questions.
That's all it
If
takes.
at the end of the conversation you decide, you know what, I'm going to wait another 5 years, 10 years, I'm never going to do it, that's up to you. You wasted 10 minutes on a phone conversation with nice people like us who are more than happy to explain the situation, help you out, help you to figure out what you want to do. And it's all about you, the buyer, really. So
Yeah, that's the other thing. You're right. You control the entire process. I have no influence, really, so to speak, over the actions of other people any more than I do the weather.
no.
So,
Could you make it sunny?
Yeah, all the advice that I can possibly give, the ability to show any house that's on the market at any time,
Yep.
all that being free to the buyer, and you control the entirety of it.
Exactly.
So what else we got?
So now I have some frequently asked questions. Where do I start when I want to buy a house?
Sure.
What do I do first?
Well, my first tip, when it comes to, especially, it doesn't have to be a first-time buyer, is getting your finances in order.
Exactly.
And I strongly advocate working with a local lender. And the reason for that is, we can go down that rabbit hole for a day. But you want to work with someone who knows the area, that knows the market. For example, I wouldn't hire an agent that works in Colorado to show me houses in St. Clairsville.
Exactly.
They might be able to do some of the similar work. They can kind of guide me through the process and at a macro level. But when it comes down to St. Clairsville, it's going to be completely different than even Wheeling. St. Clairsville and Wheeling market's different. It's just, so you try to get your finances in order, know what you're pre-qualified for, and not only that, when it comes down to financing, not all loans are created equal.
They're not. And that's another thing, you have to ask questions. Again, questions.
Sure.
We can give you a list of local lenders that we've worked well with in the past that answer questions for our clients. They communicate well, they're fast in the process, they're honest, everything's upfront with them. And I encourage everybody to call more than one lender. Don't just call the first one on the list and stop.
Sure.
Ask them questions about the loan. What kind of points are they going to have to pay? Down payment? How's the process work for them? Call the next one. Interview them, basically, over the phone.
Yeah.
And see which one you connect with the best.
And that's exactly it. When I just say every loan isn't created equal, for the general public, I think most buyers' perception is, I'm going to go to the bank, they're going to give me money, I'm going to buy a house.
Exactly.
And the things that happen in between are either they just don't know about or they're not cognizant of, and that's when a good agent will come through and kind of advise on what to expect.
Right.
Now, we can't predict the future, again, any more than we can predict the weather, but there are some things that we can at least advise on to look out for. So when we say first-time buyer, what we actually refer to is a government-backed loan. It is secured by an entity of the government, so USDA, for example, right? They have a 0% down loan. No money down. You can literally buy a house, and not only that, you can include your closing costs in the life of that loan.
Right.
So seemingly, someone right out of high school, if their credit score is good enough, they have a decent job, they can get financed, the interest rate's that low, you can show up with nothing if it's structured properly, your closing costs are exceeded, and be in a house. I mean, it's that first-time buyer friendly. Yep. The reason why we refer to that as first-time buyer is because most people, the barriers to entry for that type of loan are very low. Right? You don't have to have a good credit, or not a good credit score. You don't have to have an 800 credit score. You don't have to have 20% down. So that's where first-time
Has a little more flexibility than a conventional loan does.
But with that, there is some hurdle that we have to, or some hurdles we work around. Things like peeling paint, things like attic accesses, little small $5 fixes can stop a loan in its tracks.
Exactly.
So for every benefit that you have with the low interest rate secured by the government that makes up these programs, we have to be cognizant of it doesn't fit every single home that's available. And I hope that makes sense. The quality
And even the location of where the home is matters too.
Yeah, so USDA, for example, it won't finance in Wheeling. It's too population
And it won't
density.
finance in Steubenville
Yeah,
either.
because the population density.
Exactly.
So
it's a city instead of a village.
So a lot of times we'll get the phone call. A buyer will say, "Hey, I'm pre-approved, and I want to go," and so we have to make sure that that matches.
Exactly.
So what's the second step?
The next one is, how much does it cost? Are there hidden fees? What do I need to know? Money.
So closing costs, I guess, vary between lender to lender. There's origination fees. There's all that kind of stuff. But I boil, and you can put your 2 cents in, but I boil any transaction down into 3 phases. The inspection phase is first, title phase is second, and appraisal is the last. As far as costs are concerned to close on a house, the inspection phase is subjective.
Yeah, it's up to you as the buyer if you want the inspection. Now, there are some loan types that do require certain inspections happen. VA loans love a pest inspection. They really want to know if there's bugs in the house. For the most part, though, you have freedom to choose if you want to spend that money, and normally it's a few $100s. It's non-refundable. You do have to pay it up front before you even get the house, but it's for your own benefit to have that inspection done.
Absolutely, because it gives you the picture, an unbiased look of the actual condition of the property.
And they look for things that we can't see on a typical walkthrough.
Yeah, we're not building inspectors.
We're not crawling in the crawl space. We're not going in the attic. We're not checking, the furnace, the age and all of that. That's what the inspector does. That is their job.
So, to that extent, I always strongly advise having one done. You can use typically anyone that you deem comfortable and have them do anything you deem necessary, but you would like to have someone that can make a representation that has the license or the proper credentials.
Right.
So, as much as father-in-laws and uncles and cousins and all these other people that we know that can come and maybe someone's decent, they ran electric in their basement before, it doesn't necessarily make them an electrician.
Exactly.
So we try to, say if you're going to have an inspection done, make sure that it's not just it's completely unbiased.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I feel sometimes it's you like to use people that you know and trust, but father-in-laws are a good example. They can actually overprotect the buyer's interest.
Oh, absolutely.
They come in, hey, Colleen. They come in and they want to help so badly that they start finding things.
They're trying to protect their baby girl or whatever. They're trying to be overprotective and say, well, there's a crack right there. What's that crack for? It may be something. It may be nothing. We don't know.
But it oftentimes is, I don't want to say exaggerated, but you look at these things and without that professional license and that background, if there's really no way to differentiate between are they really overprotecting or is it someone else?
Exactly. And I always recommend that you use a certified,
right.
Licensed inspector. Again, it's your choice. That is completely up to you. And we do have a time limit that we usually put on the inspections to be done in the first, usually 10 days, 14 days sometimes, depending on, holiday weekends, that kind of thing.
Sure.
That way, we can get that out of the way at the beginning of the process. So if there are issues they find, we do have the rest of that timeline to remediate those. We can fix those.
Sure. Yeah, so on that point, there's no reason to proceed to step 2, to the title stage or the appraisal phase, if the condition of the property, if there's a hidden defect that is now discovered, if the roof is completely, needs replaced and you're no longer going to move forward.
Yeah.
So, good points.
Exactly.
So we got the house, we're working with the buyer, they're pre-qualified, they write an offer, we get through the inspection phase. What next?
How long does it take before I get my house?
Yep.
And that varies, really. If you are a lucky enough first-time buyer to walk in with $75,000 cash in hand and say, I'm buying this house today, 10 days, usually, to purchase the house.
Weeks, yeah.
For the rest of us who don't have $75,000 in cash laying around, a finance deal typically can take about 45 days, and that is not written in stone by any means.
Yeah, so in each of those phases, the inspection, the title, and the appraisal phase, oftentimes there's a hurdle. And I used to tell the story, my dad drove trucks pretty much his entire life. And they would be near Raleigh, North Carolina. And I remember him telling me a story that these truckers will be on the CB radio saying, okay, where's it at? 66. No, it's a 67. No, it's a 73. And they're calling out mile markers, right? And they're basically telling each other as they're approaching Raleigh where the traffic is going to stop. Yep. They know at the time of the day where it's going to be at, and it's kind of taking bets amongst themselves. And I tell that story to my buyers because somewhere in this transaction, we're going to hit a rough patch. I mean,
it happens every time.
Yeah, and a rough patch can be something that is very easy to work around, or sometimes it could be catastrophic and the deal doesn't go through.
Right.
That 45-day window, usually we can do it in 30 days if everything goes perfect. We say 45 to try and give that safety net.
It's buffer zone.
Yeah, and sometimes it goes beyond. So, for example, if an appraisal comes in low, if you're buying on your own, or if the seller is selling by their own, what do you do?
If the appraisal comes in low?
Yeah, what do you do?
If you are a financed buyer and you see a house that you like and it's listed for $100,000, you're pre-approved for $100,000. Great, perfect. You write your offer, you put it in, the appraisal happens, and they say, sorry, house is only worth $75,000. The bank is going to allow you to spend $75,000. So you have a couple options at that point. You negotiate back and forth with that seller, which does take up some time in that whole closing process, which is one of the reasons it can extend out past 45 days. The seller can either agree to come down and allow you to purchase the house for $75,000. They can meet you anywhere in the middle, but if it's anything above that $75,000, you, the buyer, have to come up with that extra cash on your own somehow.
Yeah, and a lot of times, if we're talking about in the first-time buyer category, if someone is 0% down, you probably don't have the difference.
Right.
So for that example, if there's a $25,000 difference between the contracted price and the appraisal amount, that could be catastrophic.
Yeah.
So there are ways to work around that kind of stuff, but that's where having
it's a negotiation
agent.
process, and negotiations always take a little bit of time. Sometimes an hour, sometimes days or
months.
weeks,
yeah, it could be
months even. Yeah. So it depends on how that goes, and each individual loan and each individual contract has been different. I've never had two the exact same way.
Sure.
So, but you can kind of, like you said, you can kind of guess how things are going to go, and we can do what's called a CMA, competitive market analysis, on our own for the house that you're going to purchase, and say, yeah, that looks like a pretty good offer. We can go ahead and rate that on the contract, or house is listed a little bit high. Maybe you should consider going a little bit lower.
Yeah, and that's getting into a little bit more of, once we're with a buyer, and that could be first time or second time, but I've always said negotiation is won or lost with what I refer to as positional power.
Yeah.
Right? Who basically has the leverage. And most of the time the seller has the lion's share, because for every one house there may be 10 buyers. The demand is on the opposite side of the table. So how do you negotiate as a buyer to get the best rate and that kind of stuff? And if you're, like I said, you can sell by yourself, you can buy by yourself. You said the 87%, so that 13 that are not using an agent, more power to you if you can handle it.
Exactly.
But you're making the single largest financial investment, especially if this is your first leap. Getting it right out of the gate is critical.
Exactly.
And if you make a mistake, it could be very costly. And by the way, I know we've said this before, it doesn't cost me anything to use your services, or vice versa. It doesn't cost a buyer anything to use our services.
Ever.
So we got through the inspection, working with title phases. A lot of times the public doesn't necessarily see or understand the difficulties in title, and we don't necessarily see them too frequently, but when they do pop up, they can be horrendous to work with.
Yeah.
So to back up, a title issue could be anything that prohibits a sale moving forward at a legal basis. So if someone else has a claim stake to the property, if there is a judgment on the property that may be $50,000 or something that no one had ever caught before, if you were to buy that property, that person then ends up with a $50,000 debt in that scenario.
Exactly.
So you don't necessarily see that as often as an appraisal issue or a inspection issue, but it's one of those things again where having a savvy agent that knows the workarounds, or who you hire matters, who you work with matters.
And that was my next point.
Yeah.
How do you find the right agent?
And working locally, I would say.
Yeah. A local agent, again, someone not from Colorado that doesn't know anything about, Jefferson, Belmont County, the Ohio Valley is just amazing. Like in Jefferson County, if you're buying a house and it has a septic, the county requires you to have a septic inspection before title is transferred.
And completely different than Belmont County.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
so
it's a little borderline away, and it's a world of difference
well, even
there.
something like Yorkville, for example. Yorkville actually has a section.
It's half and half.
It's Belmont and Jefferson County.
Yeah, exactly.
So literally, you can see the difference between one house over here. This would not apply, and this house it would.
Yep.
And
right across the street sometimes.
Yeah. And you get into these bizarre scenarios where if your agent or if you're doing this on your own and you don't know that, again, that is a costly mistake to make. And
yeah. I wrote down a note I wanted to point out. So for first-time buyers, you and I, as agents, we do this every day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes from the moment my eyes open until they close at night, I'm real estate involved the entire day. So we know kind of how things go, what's going to happen. We can almost predict it a little bit. As a first-time buyer, if you want to go on your own without an agent, you're doing this once in your life, maybe twice.
Sure.
I mean, you don't have the background experience to expect to, what's going to happen. You don't have all the connections that we do.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you can do it, go for it.
Sure.
So the next step is, how do you find the right lender?
Sure.
And again, call them, ask your real estate agent who they recommend, who they want to use, who they've had success with in the past, and call more than one. Don't just pick one random one out of the book or online or something. Local's best.
Local, that's my biggest thing is most of the lenders at a government-backed loan kind of, they're very competitive.
Right.
The rates are so competitive now that it's not like you're going to get a complete 1% difference between going from point A to point B. But developing a relationship with someone local, a local lender, even someone if you currently bank with, that's a good place to start.
And that's what I tell my clients. When I give you my list of recommended lenders, you can pick any of them. You can pick none of them.
Yeah, plug this in real quick. Keep talking.
Okay. That's completely up to you. So, again, shop around. And the next type that I had was to find the right type of mortgage. And a lot of times your lender can help you discuss your options for what kind of mortgage. Again, do you want to do a conventional loan? A lot of times 20% down. You have a little bit more leeway with what kind of house you can pick, and there's less involved in the inspections and things. But VA, FHA, USDA, those are all other options, and a lot of them, again, are no money down. So it depends on your financial status, what you're looking for, what you want to expect, your loan terms, all of that. And again, your lender can help you answer a lot of those questions.
Sure. And it's often, like we were talking about in the very beginning, it's a walk of life that most people will at least make several times, but that initial step is the hardest.
It is.
Because if you're a first-time buyer and you've never done this before, it is a very nerve-wracking, anxious kind of, I don't know what to do, therefore I don't want to do anything else because that's the safest play.
It's a mystery of the unknown.
Well, but here's the thing, is that the market is changing rapidly, especially in our area.
Yeah.
Where it's no secret to drive down I-70 or I-470, hey, there's a hotel, and look at the Highlands. The Highlands 10 years ago.
It exploded.
It didn't exist.
No.
So, you kind of take a look around, and if you are in the market now and you don't have a house, and the cracker plant does come through, it's announced, the population growth, we've heard as high as 100,000. That's like taking the city of Wheeling and multiplying it by 4 to 5 times. What does that do to the demand? It skyrockets.
Yeah.
And if the demand skyrockets, what does that do to the housing price, the housing market?
It's going to go up.
And if the market, being in even a political year, we can go down these rabbit holes all day long, but if the interest rate goes up and the price goes up, what you would have been pre-qualified for before, at one point in time, it's going to be much, much less, putting you at even a further disadvantage. So like I said, this isn't, no push, no sales, no anything else. What I would advocate for is to take the time and just consider, if you are renting right now, why not buy?
Take 10 minutes and ask some questions.
And if all that changes, if you do that and you have the ability, just because you get pre-qualified doesn't mean you have to buy either.
No.
It just gives you one available pathway to take. If you decide to keep renting, more power to you. No one's going to twist your arm. No. But like I said, if you're not a homeowner within the next 10 years and you're in the Ohio Valley, it could be much more competitive than it is today.
Right. Right, and there are people that they grow old at 95, 110, and they are still renting, and that's what they're comfortable with.
There's nothing wrong. It's I would never, in fact, we help people rent.
Yeah.
Right. It's, whatever situation works best for that particular person at that stage in life. you know where your own best interests lie.
I think of us as matchmakers
That's right.
with buyers and renters and even sellers.
Mhm.
We are matchmakers with finding a new house, finding that buyer for your house, finding that perfect rental. So we're good at connections there.
Sure.
So the next thing I have is going back on what you said at the beginning about getting your finances in order.
Mhm.
Save for your down payment, save for your closing costs, all of that kind of thing. So how much money should somebody put away?
For down payments?
And
I
that
guess?
depends.
Sure. Yeah, I
Depends
guess.
on the loan type, on how much you're going to need for your down payment. For closing costs, it depends on the cost of the house, what type of loan that you've got. And really, your lender could answer those questions for you. So if you're looking at houses and you see one that's $75,000 and it does qualify for your USDA or VA or whatever type of loan, you can call your lender and say, I like this house. If I offer 75 or 65, whatever you want to offer on it, how much would my closing cost be? And they can give you a good estimate.
Yeah, well, by law, they have to give you what's called a GFE, or a good
Right.
faith estimate.
Right.
And that estimate has to be in compliance within a specific range of, they can't tell you it's going to be $6,000 in closing, or I'm sorry, $3,000 in closing, then hand you a $6,000
Exactly.
closing cost bill. But yeah, like I said, a lot of that is.
And they can give you that guess before you even write that offer.
Yeah.
And that way you know how much you're going to have in hopefully 45, maybe 30 days away.
Mhm.
You know that, I'm going to need $5,000 for closing costs or $3,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine a scenario now where someone is watching and they are currently renting, we'll just say, call it Moundsville, right, or Steubenville, and they're paying $750 a month.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a $75,000 house that can be qualified for, well, maybe not Steubenville, but st.clairsville, right, for USDA. 0% down, include your financing, your closing costs in the life of that loan, in that $75,000. Show up to closing within the next 30 to 45 days, get handed a set of keys, your payment is less, you're now contributing to the equity that you're building for your financial future.
Yep.
And, whatever that, let's just say it's $600 a month at that payment, save that extra $150 that you would have been spending anyways, that would go into
Exactly.
someone else's pocket, and then, one extra payment a year turns into what, saving 7 or so years
I
off of a
think
30-year
it's
mortgage?
2 extra mortgage payments, not the interest, the actual mortgage.
Mhm.
It cuts your loan life by 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's just,
So,
so I would just say throw that all towards the equity, and
yeah,
you're,
exactly.
Yeah.
Pay off early and you'll spend less in the end, because that can make a serious difference there. So the next point is find the right neighborhood, not the right house.
sure.
You can move the house.
Mhm.
You can redo the house, you can tear it down, you can build a new one, you can put a cardboard box on the lot if you want to. You can't move your neighborhood. Your distance to your job is going to be the same, the schools, grocery stores, all of that's going to remain the same, but don't get caught up on finding, it's called the unicorn house, that magical, perfect fit of that house that you want, but it overlooks the city dump, or, it stares at the brick wall at the building next to you, that factory that's loud.
Sure.
So pick the right neighborhood. You can always change the paint color, you can update the porch steps, you can do all of that after you buy it. You can't do it before, so don't tear off the porch steps before closing. That's a bad idea.
And that's important. I don't think a lot of people will say, the biggest thing that I see is school district.
Yeah.
One of the biggest.
Yeah. And a lot of them narrow their search down by what school district they want their children to stay in, which is a great idea. You've got to consider that. So the next one is, okay, I've picked a house and I want to write an offer. What does that mean?
Sure. So for me, as far as an offer is concerned, there's nothing that you've ever been in inside of any market. Cars, stocks, houses, shoes, groceries, doesn't matter what it is. It's all driven by what a buyer will give and a seller will accept. We try to give some influence on, okay, hey, here's how you negotiate. Here are the standards of what the market's doing. So for example, last year, between 90 to 93% of sales price versus list price. So a $100,000 house typically sold for $90,000 to $93,000. And that's how you correlate that. So you would suggest that would be where offers would most likely land. However, the buyer is in complete control. Yeah. Just because I say, hey, here's what the market average is, if you want to tell me you want to offer $50,000 for a $100,000 house, I'll submit it.
We write it.
Yeah, I can't promise that we can make the seller accept it. We'll submit it no different than a job resume. We're offering this, and here's to why, and explain it. But if a seller doesn't see it.
Exactly. If the seller wants to accept $50,000, great. If not, I'm sorry, you can either negotiate at that point,
Or find
they can write a
something-
counter offer, or you can move on and find a different one.
That's right.
I mean, you're really limited on your options
But-
at that point there.
But to answer your point, if they find a house that they like, again, there's a lot of incentive to be into a house with a low interest rate.
Right.
Right. I mean, right now, and there's no signs that I guess they're going to jump up dramatically, but at this point they're at historic lows.
Mhm.
The seemingly, the next step would be probably creeping back up. Right. I mean,
Right.
they can't go much lower.
If they go much lower, then they're not
Yeah.
going to make any money.
That's-
So, and then I had a couple of mistakes that first-time buyers make. They rush into a purchase.
Mhm.
They're so excited. I'm buying my first house.
Mhm.
I like this first one that I walked in. Yeah, it's pretty good. We'll just do it right now.
Mhm.
They rush into it. They don't consider everything. They don't get their pre-approval done. And not getting your pre-approval done from the start, if you wait till later in the game, that can be very costly for you.
Sure.
You can miss out on that dream house that you might actually do like.
Well, that's a fantastic point. I'm glad you brought that up. Is that most agents, myself being one of them, it's not to take a dig at anybody. It's not to it's not diminutive in any form.
Mhm.
But I won't work with a buyer who's not pre-qualified, and there's specific reasons for that. It helps both you and I as far as the buyer is concerned. I'll gladly help you get pre-qualified. I'll stick
Yep.
with you by your side from the very start to the very end. But we're not going to see properties until you are, because that's exactly what happens. A buyer, this house pops on the market today. I want to go see it tomorrow. Okay, are you pre-qualified? Well, I'll do that later. Well, what happens if I go show you that house, right? And I'm taking time out of your day, out of my day, and everything else, and you fall in love with it, and you want to write an offer. Your offer for that house, even if it's full price, even if it's above full price, has no substance.
Mhm.
Because I can sit here and I can say, I'll offer you $110,000 on your $100,000 house. Okay, great, I'll gladly sign. But how are you going to close? I haven't even talked to a lender yet.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. And a lot of times sellers will not accept an offer unless
Without a pre,
exactly. And just because your credit score might be 800 does not mean you're going to be pre-approved for that number
Well,
amount.
Your credit
Then-
score is one of the biggest contributing factors, but
It
debt
is.
to income, your length at your current job. If you've only been there for 30 days and it requires 90 days to get that type of financing, all that stuff is in play. So you fall in love with this house and you run around like crazy, and then you're like you said, you're rushing into something at that point.
Yeah, don't rush.
Yeah, as compared to if you do the proper steps, pre-qualification first, developing a relationship with a local agent, and then going house hunting. And if you run into a house that you fall in love with right out of the gate, I'm not going to tell you that you can't offer, but if that's the only house you've ever seen,
How do you know what else is out there?
how are you comparing that price as compared to the house down the street or any of these other?
Exactly.
So yeah, you're right. We do get that kind of and everything in this business, it's on a rush.
It is.
Everybody
Hurry
wants
up
something.
and wait.
Yeah,
I tell everybody.
Yeah, everybody wants something done tomorrow, and there's just a lot of these steps that again, it's hard to finance something that's just called $100,000. It's to convince the bank to give you $100,000. It's not like there's a magic wand that I can wave and say, hey.
It's an in-depth process
It
that
is.
takes them quite a lot of thinking to figure out if you're
Inspection, appraisal,
Yeah.
title, underwriting, all of that. And throughout the entire process, the bank is going to be asking for records. Don't go and,
That's my next point. Don't screw up your credit.
I had a buyer before that we were under contract, and they were so excited because we were getting the clear to close that they went out and took out a new credit card and bought all this furniture. And it torpedoed everything.
Yep.
They pulled the credit report at the very end, and it has a happy ending. They did end up getting the house, but it delayed it so long that after having to pay the interest rate renewal and everything else, they spent more keeping the loan than they did on the furniture itself
Yep.
on the credit card.
Yep.
Which,
People will get a new credit card for furniture.
Mm-hmm.
They'll close out old credit cards that they don't use anymore because they think they don't need them. They'll go and buy a new car to fit in that new garage.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do that till after closing.
Yeah, that's what.
Don't
what it-
spend anything.
Yeah, don't buy a car because if you do, you're going to be living in it.
Exactly. Make it a big one if you're going to live in it.
Yeah.
Again, don't nitpick the house.
Mm-hmm.
Pick the right neighborhood. The house you can make adjustments to. And that's really about it. The summary is find a good realtor, find a good lender, stick to your budget. If they say you're pre-approved for $75,000, doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and find a house that's listed for $75,000.
Find it.
If you're comfortable with one at $50,000, we will help
Yeah.
you just the
We
same.
get buyers, for $250,000 plus, and they'll buy a $75,000 house.
Exactly,
It's-
and it depends on what your situation is, what you're comfortable with your monthly payment being. Obviously, the lower the price of the house, the lower your monthly payment's going to be.
Sure.
So, make sure you save the money for your down payment, for your closing costs. If you're going to have those, don't spend that if you know you're going to have that.
Sure.
And again, your lender will tell you from the start if you're going to need those things.
Sure.
Don't rush into the purchase. Research the neighborhood. Call the local police department, see what kind of crime rate they've got. Talk to the neighbors if you want to, I guess. So, and, inspection.
Yep, very important. Okay, well, if you're happy, I think we can cut it here. I mean, anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, I think I'm good.
Well, my name is Johnny Kazemka with Harvey Goodman.
Floie Trimmer. Harvey Goodman as well.
All right, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.